what's going on with the Second Amendment. So I'm going to spend a little time explaining to you about the Fifth Amendment. And if you're not real familiar with it, I hope that by the end of our time together, you'll have some knowledge about it and also about some more problems. I know we've been talking about problems that we have in our country, but I want to share with you what we believe to be one of the solutions, if not the solution, to the problems we're having in our country. So, first of all, I want you to see that we're going to be talking not only about the problem and the solution, but we're going to talk about how that solution works, what our strategy is, and how you can get involved. So first of all, there are three parts of the problem, and these are problems that are related to our federal government. And one of them is the debt and spending crisis. The second is federal overreach. And finally, you have the negative effects of career politicians. So as you see here, the debt and spending crisis, we know that we are in the worst inflation that we've had in years. And also that the national debt has quadrupled since 2004. Big problems. But one of the things to remember about the debt crisis is this, that both parties are equally at fault. So if you start looking at the debt crisis, you're going to see that over the past 100 years, the U.S. federal government, if you can't read this from the floor out there, has increased from $409 billion in 1922 to, look at this number, $33.97 trillion in the year 2023. So we're going to continue to have to pay for this irresponsible spending that's been going on. And then another sad part about it is that our children and grandchildren are going to be affected by this. If you can't see that chart very well, it says if a child is born in the year 2020, that their share of the debt is over $73,000. And it goes up from there by the time they're 30 years old to $204,000. Just absolutely unbelievable. Well, the federal government seems to think that there is no way to impose a balanced budget. But you have to remember that states have to operate under a federal budget, a balanced budget, and that they do a fairly good job of it. A lot better than our Congress does balancing the budget. So if you look right up here, you're going to see that we're going to continue to feel the effects of it. If you look at, up at the top blue, that's Medicare. And we're told that Medicare is going to be defunct in 2 years. And then the Social Security Administration says this, let me read it. Benefits are now expected to be paid in full on a timely basis until 2037, when the trust fund reserves are projected to become exhausted. That's not too far in the future. And then this one on the right, you can see federal revenue in the blue graph, and then if you look above it, that is federal spending. And if you project it on out, you see that our children and grandchildren are going to suffer a lot more from this than even you and I are today. Well, the second problem that we're going to look at is federal overreach. Now, there are a lot of ways that the federal government abuses its power, but one of the most concerning happens every single day among the 400 plus federal agencies. And what's happening with those is that these are unelected officials, and they actually they're writing the rules and the regulations for us that we have to live by. The ATF, for example, the IRS, the EPA. And when that happens, then we find that we have rules that we don't even know we're breaking. And one of the big problems is that Article 1 of the Constitution says that all legislative power is vested in Congress and not in the bureaucracies. So one of the problems I just talked about is the federal bureaucracy. So I want you to see this quick little video, and it'll point out what I'm talking about. So here are the bills that are passed by Congress that are signed by the President. Now look at this. This is the laws that are passed by the bureaucracies. A big difference, and it hasn't stopped yet. They write a new one, they say, every 2.5 hours. Well, neither the bureaucrats nor the Congress are the only ones to create laws out of thin air. One of the things that happens is that the Supreme Court creates laws out of thin air. Michael Ferris is going to tell us a little bit about that in this video.
People like us, people that are frustrated in Washington, D.C., often say, well, they don't follow the Constitution anyway. Not true. They follow the wrong one. They're following the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, rather than the Constitution as written.
This, taken out of my pocket, is a pocket Constitution. 4,000 words in the original document, 4,400 words. And if you count the amendments, we're talking about 7,000 words. But here is the Constitution in force today. This is 3,000 pages of Supreme Court rulings showing what every ruling has done to the original words. This isn't going to get any smaller. In fact, every time they publish this document, they leave a bunch of blank pages at the back for additional rulings that they know are coming. Every page in this document means a grant of power to the federal government. Understand that this is the Constitution in operation today. Unless we change it, unless we make its wording crystal clear, we're going to continue to operate under this document forever and ever until the whole House of Cards is falling down.
Well, neither bureaucrats or Supreme Court justices or Congress are, well, Congress is elected, but bureaucrats in the Supreme Court are not, and yet they are the ones who are taking the power away from the people. And that power then is given to entities that are hardly ever held accountable for their actions. Well, let's take a look at this one. Speaking of unaccountable federal officials, take a look at how many years these people have been in Congress. And they're on both sides of the aisle. And you might ask yourself the question, well, what's the big deal? Their constituents elected them, so shouldn't they be able to serve? Well, yes, but, however, the longer people stay in D.C., the more they begin to smell like the swamp. So, we have to remember that they will continue to stay in power. They don't really have any incentive to change because they're pretty happy continuing with acquiring power and wealth and influence. And, you know, we the people can stop that. And it's not going to stop until we do something about it. So let's take a look right now at this one. This shows you the congressional re-election rate. That speaks pretty much for itself, doesn't it? So right now, let's take a look at the solution. We've talked a little bit about the problems. Now let's look at the solution. So what did our founders have to say about this?
15th September, 2 days before they signed the document, the end of 4 long, hot months in Philadelphia, they were ready to go home. But George Mason noticed that Article 5 only had a single method for amending the Constitution. He said, wait a minute, what if Congress becomes an obstacle?
if it's accountable to Congress, to reduce the power of the federal government. So we need to give the states the ability to reduce the power of the federal government.
Yes, thank you, Colonel George Mason, for giving us a fighting chance. And we're told that this was a unanimous decision by the delegates to the Constitutional Convention, that we the people should have the right to stand up against our federal government. And that's exactly what they did with the Article 5 option. I'm so thankful that they did that. And that brings us to the actual text of Article 5. So I'll read part of it for you if you can't see it. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, look at this part, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So we have been given as states the power to call a convention to propose amendments to limit the scope and power of the federal government, which is exactly what Article 5 allows us to do. And once 2/3 of the states pass a resolution calling for this convention, then the states will come together, propose amendments, and vote on them. And we'll go into that process just a little bit more as we look at the next slide. So this is our action plan. We're going to use Article 5 as the founders intended. And we believe that the federal government will never fix itself. So we're so thankful that they gave us a way to make those changes for ourselves, because we believe that the federal government has gotten off track, and by using Article 5 of the Constitution, we'll be able to get that back. We want to get back to our founding principles. We don't want to throw anything away or start all over again, but we want to get back to the plan that our founders had for us. So let's see how it does work. All right, well, first of all, the people go to their legislatures and they ask their legislatures to pass the Convention of States resolution. And this resolution has to go through the committees in both houses. It has to pass out of committee, and then it has to pass the floor in both chambers. When 34 states have passed their resolutions, then a convention can be called. And the state legislators then choose their commissioners to go to the convention. But you have to remember, no matter how many legislators they choose or how many commissioners they choose to send, it's only one vote per state. Pretty important to remember that as well. And then the amendments are proposed, they're debated, and they're voted on. Now, the language of the amendments has to be limited to the resolution. Anything that's not considered to be part of the language of the resolution would be thought to be out of order. And then the proposed amendments have to be passed by the majority, a simple majority of the states attending. After the proposed amendments get through the whole process, then of course the amendment goes out to the states where it has to be ratified, just like it has to be ratified or has been ratified every time Congress has put an amendment out to the people. And if you think about it this way, it's only going to take one house in 13 states to stop an amendment from going forward. So it's a high bar that we have set us in front of us, but it assures that no bad amendment gets put into our founding document. So when it's passed and ratified by 38 states, as Article 5 says, then the entire process is completed and the amendment is added to our Constitution. So now let's look real quickly at our strategy. So we deal in the legislatures and we also deal with the grassroots. So as far as the legislatures go, the 50 states go to our legislators and ask that they support a Convention of States resolution. And that resolution is going to look like this. It's going to have 3 parts to it. And if you can read up there at the top, it says it's going to be to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and finally to limit the terms of office for officials and members of Congress. So those are the 3 areas that the bills have to follow. Now, Convention of States does not support any particular amendment because we want the states to come together, talk about the bills, talk about the amendments that need to be proposed, and debate those. So the next part of our strategy is to build the grassroots. And we've done that very, very well in the 50 states. And right now we have active grassroots volunteers and supporters in 7,386 state legislative districts. And those districts are led by our district captains, and we're actively recruiting more district captains all the time. So it's our volunteers that keep our movement going. And as you see, with over 5 million supporters throughout the country, then COS Action is well on its way to making sure that this Article 5 convention actually does take place. Just recently, the Trafalgar Group did a polling of voters, and they asked them their opinion of Convention of States. 60% of these came back saying that they would support a Convention of States in their own state. And then if you look over here on the left-hand side of that circle, that's what we're really, really proud of, because we found out from this polling that Convention of States is a bipartisan effort, that 75% of Republicans support a Convention of States and 50% of Democrats do as well. And these are some of our endorsers. We have some little books on the table out there if you want to come and find out more about the people in the know who are in support of Convention of States. So here's where you come in. We'd like to ask you to get involved. I've already mentioned our captains, our district captains. I'll show you a video on that in just a moment. But it's time. It's time for us all to take a stand and get active and make this thing happen. So let's look at what you can do. You can scan that QR code right there and you can sign our petition. You can go to conventionofstates.com as well. We have petitions out there in the hallway. But if you give us your address, then we'll send that to your representative and your senator in the state. letting them know that you're in support of Convention of States. Let's look at a little bit about the district captain now.
District captains form the backbone of the Convention of States movement, fulfilling our vision of a citizen network that restores self-governance in America. As a district captain, you will help recruit, welcome, and educate other volunteers in your local area. You may also inform in-district volunteers when they can have their voices heard at community hearings at their state capitol. COS provides cutting-edge training and connects you with patriots who have been exactly where you are starting. So get on the front lines of the movement to reclaim liberty. Apply today at conventionofstates.com.
And we have a lot of positions that are open, not only district captains, but volunteer activists, but also leadership roles. You can find out more about this by going to our website as well. And you can use your God-given gifts to work side by side with other patriots right there in your community. And then finally, if you'd like to help us to recruit and train and deploy more activists throughout the state, we can certainly use your help with donations. So I want to just say thank you for listening, and also, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, Julie, I didn't see anything in this video about the status of our resolutions throughout the country. Could you mention something about that in addition to our 3F legislation initiative?
All right. You know what? John O'Dell is going to be speaking about that this evening, so in the interest of time, I think I'll save that for John, if that's okay. He's coming up pretty soon. Yeah, we wanted to update you on it as well. So I wanted to tell you that it takes a nation to save a nation, and we have the Constitution on our side. So thank you so much for listening.